Greetings, YouTube. I know that some people don't know this, but during World War II and prior to World War II in Germany, there was something called the Holocaust. The German government began to crack down on the Jewish people as well as the Romani and the gay community and a number of other socialists and things like that. They didn't like, and they did a really good job. You've probably seen the video clips of them burning books. The books they were burning were about sex positivity, the trans community, and things like that. They were burning books that helped people understand their own gender and sexuality. They were not supporting of that, even though some of the high-ranking members in the Nazi Party were in fact gay. Weirdly, isn't that how the people in power can do what they want, and those that have no power were sent to camps to die? But it's not taught well in America. And recently, in Tennessee, they decided to pull the book Mouse, which is a wonderful graphic novel that uses a metaphor of cats and mice to talk about the Holocaust. It's powerful, it's moving, it's disturbing. It is not an easy read, but it's very important and quite appropriate for an eighth grade reading level. But they decided to pull it from the shelves, and their argument was language and nudity. Now, in fact, there was a very brief, not gratuitous scene of a human woman who was nude and committed suicide. So in the context of the book, it was not glorification. It was not titillation. There was nothing about it that was going to excite anybody, or at least I sure as shit hope not. Um, as far as a language, I can guarantee you that on a daily basis, the members of those eighth grade classes not only hear that kind of language, or worse, they use it themselves. Anyone who was in eighth grade remembers that. We swore like sailors. Yes, we did. So that's not shocking to anyone. And using those arguments to get a very powerful book about the Holocaust off the shelves and out of the hands of children is disingenuous and vile. It is erasing the history of the Holocaust. Now, you could say that people could go outside of school and get copies of that. In fact, they are. There are people right now making sure that those get to the hands of any kid that wants. But lots of children are not, by inclination, readers. So if they're not assigned a book to read, they're very likely not to read it. And there are kids that are being raised in households that don't have books. Flat out. I know people, I've worked with people who were raising children in households that had no books. In fact, a friend of mine was trying to make sure his visitation rights, or a guy I used to work with, make sure his visitation rights would be solidified, and so he would not have any, problems with that. And he asked me if I had anything that would help give his house an educational boost. So I gave him an entire encyclopedia set. It wasn't the newest encyclopedia set, but it was an entire encyclopedia set, which did help give the people the impression that he was providing educational materials for his kid. And he had a heart of gold, not a bright dude, but a heart of gold, and I wanted to help him, and I did. But there are lots of people raising children in America that have no books. Thanks to people like Dolly Parton, who have made sure that kids get books. I mean, she has donated millions of dollars to help children have books. Dolly Parton is a goddamn saint. She is. If she isn't deified when she finally shucks off that mortal coil, it'll be a crime against humanity. Um, but kids don't necessarily have access to books. So taking them off school shelves means that they're not going to have access to a very powerful lesson about the Holocaust. And if you put it into context, you can teach kids that, and it's not going to shock them in the way you think it is. It will move them because it's horrifying. There was a fantasy or a horror book I read years ago, and in it, this human was aware of the supernatural. And while moving through Germany one day, through a section of the city that had not been rebuilt yet, she picked up the fact that there was this dark presence in this building, in the basement of this building. And she was talking to a vampire. And he said, yes, we don't go there. And she goes, what do you mean? He says, there are horrors down there that we don't want to face. She's like, what happened? He says, that's where they tortured and killed people during the Second World War. He said, there is no monster in the world worse than humanity. It was an important statement, I thought, and very illustrative of what we can do, what we're capable of. And we need to make sure that kids know that. If you are not being made uncomfortable, if you are not having your mind stretched and learning about the good and the bad that we can commit, you're not going to be aware of it and you're not going to see it. And that, of course, is what the white nationalists want. They don't want us to see that, because at the end of every single fascist narrative, it comes down to hating Jewish people. It's always happened. You scratch a conspiracy theory deep enough, and it's going to be about hating Jewish people and women, of course, but Jewish people, they target them. They hate them. They love Israel because Israel is key in the end times, but they don't like Jewish people in general. It's a weird dichotomy that they hold in their minds. The cognitive dissonance is quite profound. But yeah, we need powerful books to get into the hands of kids. 8th grade is not too young. High school is not too young. Um, and please remember that at the moment, K through 12 in America, we are not teaching CRT, critical race theory, to any student that is not taking an advanced pre-college course. And if you ever have somebody say that, well, I don't want my kid to be discriminated against because they're white, congratulations. You are using critical race theory. So your idea that critical race theory is somehow anti-American is bullshit. America is so racist that if you speak out against racism, they will call you un-American. And that's what's going on when you yank Mouse off the shelves. It is racism. It is anti-Semitism. It is trying to whitewash and take away the narrative of Jewish people telling their story. And that is vile and horrifying. And if it doesn't make you angry, that makes me wonder why.